Welcome to this new how-to. In this how-to we're going to look at how you can start the engine of the Havilland DHC Beaver, which is an aircraft right from 1947, so I would say an old lady or an old man. It looks really cool right from the outside. If we would look at the level of detail, it's really amazing, right? You can see all the details here. All the pops are here nicely modeled, including some scratches over here. I would say I think this is probably one of the most nicest additions, and also the nice I would say modeled aircrafts, which is part of sim update number 11, or I'll say actually the 40th anniversary edition, right? So let's go inside the cockpit. Inside the cockpit you will see a lot, right? You can see, let's say, nice let's say electronic flight back here, so that's really cool, right? So they simply added it, and here you can switch to, I would say, GPS or analog radios. You can switch on or off the I would say the passengers, right, or cargo. That's something you can switch, and then some things will change, right? If you switch to cargo, then the back would look different. So you can configure the aircraft with your flight path, which I would say is cool. Let's set it now to, let's say, passenger, and the other things which you can do is, I would say, move certain covers, move the yoke belt, the rudder lock, the tie downs, right? So you can configure everything from the exterior on the top. Avionics, you can do it like this, so you can switch it to dual VOR CDI, or you can set it to ADF DME, which stands for distance measure equipment. You can hide the co-pilot, and you also can aircraft vibration is off, but I do think that you really need to keep it on, right? Zooming out a bit, here we see the cockpit, right? So the cockpit, here are the flaps on top, right? Let's start on this left side, the flaps, which will indicate in which, I would say, situation of flaps are, right? Full flap, landing, takeoff, and climb and cruise. Then we've got the oil pressure and fuel pressure warnings, right? If these lights are illuminating, you might have a challenge. And then here we've got all the gauges, right? The gauges, the airspeed, the suction, the clock, and I would say the turn. Then the one of the radios, right? You can switch the heading box. So this looks like to be the VOR radio. And then we've got the vertical climb speed. And we've got the altitude, the vertical horizon, of course. You can see that the, I would say, buttons are partially working, right? Not all of them. Then here we've got another one, which is also looks like to be the VOR. So if we switch to double VOR, let's see what happens. Right, you saw what happened, right? So then this will change, because the bottom one, that's the one for ADF. So keep that in mind, that you need to use that. This is the simple compass, right, which you can use to figure out if you want to fly a VFR by using a compass. Then moving to the center, we can see the manifold for the manifold pressure, and the RPM in hundreds, and there we've got the levelers for throttle, propeller, and the mixture. Below that are the throttle leveler tension, the tension for the propeller leveler, right? Tension, I would say, I'm not sure what tension is, to be honest. I think how easy they go or how difficult they go. And then below that we see a lot of temperature measurements for the oil. We see the fuel and the oil pressure. We see the fuel which is available in 3 tanks, because there's 3 tanks, the front, rear, and the middle. We can see the cylinder temperature, and then there's another temperature meter here also, which I don't know what it is. If we hide the yoke, right, let's do that. We see a lot more, because there we also see the autopilot, because it has an autopilot. It has, I would say, different options to set the altitude. It has the transponder over here, as well as the say start and stop time, right? So you can use it for VFR purposes. And then you've got the ADF frequency. So this is the part for the ADF. So if you want to fly VOR, then you need to use this one. If you want to fly ADF or using ADF, then you should use this one. Going a little bit lower, we see the wobble pump, which is really important to use, as well as the carburetor heater, as well as the emergency cutoff, right? So that's the cutoff to, say, shut down the fuel in case something really goes wrong. If you want to oil fill a cap, I would think that it would be, or that this would be normally a button which you can remove and then refill it, but maybe I'm wrong. And then here we've got the cabin heat. Moving to the left position again, we've got the parking brakes and several other interesting buttons, like for example the fuel selector. Keep in mind that this one, right, so if it, let's say, points down, which is default position, it means none of the fuel tanks are selected. Here we've got the fuel tanks, or the magneto, sorry, and several buttons, including the pitot heat, but also the lights over here, and some other lights over here, right, the strobe, the panel lights, and the landing lights, and then the fuel boost and the starter over here. Followed by the batteries and of course the avionic master one, which is also known for the radio. If we move into this nice area, let me move a little bit more to the left. There we see the primer, right? So the primer is something which we need to use in a few seconds, and that's the aircraft, right? So on the right side, so that means the co-pilot, we also have, I would say, different buttons. So let's zoom into that piece a little bit more. So it's fully equipped with a Garmin GNS 530, and on top of that we can see the different modes which we can fine-tune to, I would say, manipulate the volume for the different radio types. Here we can set up the flight plan, and then below that is a smaller one, it's a GNS 430. So you can see that this aircraft, although it's a little bit old, it has, I would say, all kind of modern equipment on board. So that's really cool to see. Then over here we've got the compass and the compass deviation card, and on top there's, I would say, something, it's the roller trim, right? You can roller trim or the pitch trim are over here, as well as on the left side, and then you've got this nice button which doesn't work, but these, I would say, circles do work. Then we've got the the temperature, which we can see over here, and then yeah, that's it, right? So that's it. So emergency equipment is there, right, if in case needed. Well, hopefully we don't need it. So let's see if we can start the engine, right? So to do that, we're gonna use, of course, the checklist, because nobody knows the checklist from top of mind. So we're gonna go to it completely. Nice thing is that it will illuminate the component which you will need. So the magneto needs to be switched to off, right, or the ignition. So we're gonna check the box. Parking brakes are set. You can see it here. That's good. The controls are unlocked, right? We can move around, and also, I would say, moving the yoke goes perfectly, which means also the flight controls are correct. Then the trims, which are on the top right, which I just showed you, you can adjust them if needed, but it's not, it really depends on your scenario. In some cases you might need to train them a bit, especially the one for elevator, right? You might want to prefer to say, okay, hey, I want to have the nose up a little bit more, and if you move it, you will see that this one moves closer to nose up, and if you move the other way around, it moves to nose down, as you already expected. Then all the switches need to be off, and all the switches, they really mean all the switches, so that means all these buttons except the strobe light needs to be switched off for some reason. So we're gonna mark it, and then we're gonna continue with the nicest button. It's the battery. As soon as you switch on the battery, you see things will start to appear, right? Maybe you saw it or not. Well, in that case, let's do it again. You can see that the voltmeter, I would say, increases. You can see that the I would say amount of fuel is now being displayed. You saw some gauges here also, say, expanding and then returning to a normal value, which is good. Then the fuel quantity check, and that's over here, right? The fuel quantity check. Here you can check how much of gallons is in the fuel tanks. We've got a front, rear, and middle tank, and I would say there's enough fuel for now. So we're gonna tick it, and then we're gonna set the altimeter, right? The altimeter, really important component which you need to set, right? Because if you don't set it, well, your mission might fail. And it can be either done by using this small button, right? Or you can press the B from Bravo. That will set it directly to the correct altitude, which is, I would say, required for the region where you're in, because it might differ per region, might even differ per country. As soon as you've done that, you can see that the altimeter, I would say, resets and shows the correct altimeter. In case you're flying at night, then make sure, of course, that you check the lights and then check all the lights. So we're gonna check the box here and then do before starting the engine. The first thing which is really important is, of course, check that the space around the aircraft is, I would say, not occupied by someone, but that somebody is, I would say, very close to the propeller, because that will hurt if you will be hit by it. That's the case. So the all the switches are still off, right? So that's good. So then the next position where we need to go to is increase the throttle. So to half inch. So we're going to increase it like this. And then we're going to make sure that the decrease RPM is set for the propeller, right? You might expect to be full set, but it needs to be set to decrease, as well as the mixture leveler needs to be set to idle cutoff currently. So going to the carburetor heater, which is over here, that needs to be set to cold, right? Here it says if the engine is cold, first flight of the day, master switch on, starter, propeller, right? Use starter to rotate the propeller to make sure an excessive amount of fuel is not trapped in the lower cylinders, forming a hydraulic lock, right? So you can move this one a few times. Nothing will happen. So simply do that, then it will rotate, and that's, I would say, what they mean with that if you, I would say, are starting the aircraft as first time of the day. Then you need to switch off the battery again. So off. And then you can continue with the rest of the flight. The weird thing, however, is, let me make those items as marked. If you go to this section, it will again go to the full cycle, right? So engine warm up, make sure that you set the batteries to on, which is kind of weird because we already did it, right? But hey, let's do it again. We're following the checklist, and the propeller area is still clear. And then we need to make sure that the fuel and oil emergency cutoff is set to open, which means it's in this position. So you don't need to do anything for that. It's in this position by default. Then we're going to select the fuel, the fullest tank. Well, in this case, you can see that the amount of fuel is the same in all the tanks. So we're going to move this button and we're going to switch it to a different position. So let's do the center tank first. Tick it, then go to the mixture settings, which is over here. Set it to full, as you used to with flying the Cessnas, for example. Make sure that the throttle is set correctly, which is the case. And then set the ignition, which can be found here, to both. Once you've done that, you need to hit the primer, right? That was the small button which was next to the chair of the pilot. 4 times. Check it and then go to the wobble pump. Maybe you remember the wobble pump, right? There were some wobble pumps in, I would say, older aircraft previously. And one of them, I would say, I think it was with the Junkers, caused a lot of challenges because you couldn't get those engines started. For this one, however, it's, I would say, a little bit easier. Or maybe it was the Fokker, I'm not remembering. The thing which you need to keep in mind is that you need to keep an eye on, I would say, this small gouge. Because if you do it once... Oh, sorry, wrong. You will already see that it's hitting the 5 value. As soon as you see the 5 value being hit, then you can switch on the starter. If you're in time, it will start. If it will drop to this value, or below this value I should say, it might result in that the aircraft or that the engine will not start correctly. In that case, simply perform the wobble pump again, and after that set the propeller to full to increase RPM, right? So we set to increase RPM, so that's good. And then have a look at the gouges over here, right? Make sure that they're stable, make sure that they're working correct. And once that's the case, we're gonna start with the engine warm-up. For the engine warm-up, we need to do 2 things, right? We need to ensure that the RPM is set to roughly 1000, which means, let's say, decreasing the RPM, or sorry, the RPM is hidden behind here, right? So let me move it. So RPM 1000, so I'm gonna increase it. Not too much. And what you then will see is that all the gouges, including the temperature, will slowly start to increase, right? Because it's, would say, heating up the engine. You can see the cylinder also increasing temperature. So leave it there for a while, because it should, I would say, warm up the engine correctly, of course. Then it says, okay, decrease the RPMs. So you need to decrease it. And then increase it again. and that's to simply ensure that to circulate the oil in the constant speed unit and propeller cylinder. And you will also see it will, I would say, result in an increase of the temperatures. So simply do it a few times, and then if you're happy, right, again, perform a final check on the gouges. If they're fine, if they're in the correct position, then you can continue with the engine ground tests, which are setting the parking brakes, which were already set, right? So control column, pull fully back, and with the control column they really refer to the yoke, which is, let's say, temporarily missed. So you need to do it like this, make sure that it works, right? Do some exercise over here. If everything is okay, then you can check it, as well as the parking brake, of course. And then the fuel selector, well, we will leave it in the center because this is still the fullest tank. And then we're going to increase the propeller lever, right? The propeller lever was already here, but was already set to increase RPM, which is good. Then it says, okay, increase the RPMs to 1750 RPM. 1750 RPM, as you can see, it's, I would say, a little bit more. So we're now at 1500. You need to keep an eye on this one, right? Which is on the on this side. So now it's 1800. So let's decrease it a bit. So we're good. I'm gonna mark it, and then we're gonna say, okay, hey, magnetos, 100 RPM max difference, right? So check that the RPM in the RPM doesn't exceed when it drops 100. So we're gonna leave it like this. And then, based on a tip which I received from somebody else, so thank you for that, you need to switch it first to L, which is the left, and then check if this gauge does not return to, I would say, a value lower than more than 103. Then do the same thing for, I would say, move it again, right? And make sure that this one stays stable. If that's the case, then it's good. So once you've done that, right, you can set it to both again, where you will see it will increase again. If everything is fine as it currently is, that right, then you can drop it to 600 RPM. And 600 RPM is really low. So 600 RPM is almost, I would say, central or in zero position. So we've done that. We've done that, and then say magnetos, the cutoff test. And the cutoff test simply means, okay, what happens if you switch it to off? Well, it will stop the engine, right? Nothing weird happens. And then back to the both position. The thing is that now the engine has stopped, we need to restart it again, right? So make sure that you hit the bubble pump once again, and then hit the starter button again. And you can see it start, right? So that works. Still fine. And then you can start taxiing, right? So move the flaps and then start taxiing. So the flap positions are shown here, right? So you can move the flaps up and down if you want. And that will result in that, say, in this leveler to, say, normally to increase or decrease, right? So let me do it. Let's see if it really works. Oh, I need to set a parking brake because I removed it. Let me see what the buttons are, because I'm using a different joystick. It's always a challenge to find which buttons it are. Likely not these buttons. And the thing is that I really didn't find another option, right? So in that case, move the, I would say, the flaps using the joystick which you prefer to have. I couldn't find them, to be honest, in this aircraft. But hey, that's probably me, right? Because I'm also not perfect. Maybe they're hidden here. Also not. Well, in that case, we've got a challenge, right? Because we need to set them. So normally I would do it, I would say, pretty easily. So what you can do if you don't know the button, simply do like me, go to the controls. And inside the controls, in this case, select the keyboard, right? And then search for flaps. And there you will see, okay, hey, increase flaps is F7 key, right? Extend flaps F8. So we probably need to press F7 in that case. So let me do that. Oh, there it is, right? So it moves now to the flap position. We can check it from the outside. It's also still good, right? The aircraft is only moving, which we probably would like to prevent. But hey, that's due to the fact that we removed the parking brake by accident. So let's do it like this, and then we can safely, let's say, play around with the aircraft. Once that's done, of course, you can increase the propeller leveler. You can start, I would say, doing all kind of other tests, steering, etc., and then, of course, take off. In this case, we're going to end this tutorial here, right? Because we're not going to take off. In this video, we looked at starting the engine of this nice aircraft. It's the Havilland DHC-2 Beaver, which was built in 1947. A nice aircraft, really nicely modeled, right? So kudos for the developer of this aircraft. Really, let's say, cool to see how this one looks like, and will probably fly very nice. If you want to know how you can, for example, navigate using this aircraft, then keep an eye on my channel, because I'm planning to record some videos about that. Again, here ends this video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, then consider to use the like button. If you got questions or comments, then feel free to post in the comment box below. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.